When I originally reviewed Symphon Gear and said that it was the perfect combination of idols and mahou shoujo. If someone asked me about mechas and idols, I couldn't say Idolmaster Xenoglossia is the one. Hello everyone, welcome to the Weeb initiative. I'm your host, the Weeb. This is the show where every other week I'll be talking about anime, manga, and everything in between. This week, following our little theme for this year, I will be talking about the last Idolmaster for some time. This is Idolmaster Xenoglossia. I think I'm pronouncing this correctly, I don't actually know. So, let's start. First, the stats. Idolmaster Xenoglossia was originally an anime that ran from April 2007 to September 2007, and it had a manga that ran from February 2007 to January 2008, and 2 light novels. That being said, disclaimers first and foremost. The first one is spoiler alert. I'll be talking about everything I have to say about this, possibly about this anime, so story and everything else. Second one is I will probably slander it a lot, even though this is an Idolmaster series and I love that franchise overall. This anime felt off, really off. Anyway, so let's start at the beginning. So why did I watch Idolmaster Xenoglossia? What is Idolmaster Xenoglossia? So imagine for a moment that in 2007, for some reason, Bandai wanted to kind of use some of the assets that they had to make Gundam Seed, and they knew that Idolmaster was kind of getting traction somewhat because the original game is from 2005, and from that junction of ideas they went like, oh, what if we took the girls from Idolmaster and got them into Gundams for some reason? And this was born. So basically, why am I saying exactly Gundam? First off, this is made by Sunrise, the same guys who make Gundam throughout its whole history, and this is not intended, right? So I did review 2 different series of the Gundam franchise, The Witch from Mercury and then Iron Blood Orphans, and 2 seasons, 2 different series of Idolmaster, and for some reason, somewhat, we ended up in the junction of both of them that happened 2007, even before the OG Idolmaster, 2011 by A1 Pictures. That being said, this is a part of my opinion already, but if this was the first Idolmaster I ever watched, I wouldn't be so infatuated with the series, I'm pretty sure. So basically, right, let's start with the story already. So basically, we start the story with Haruka lives with her grandfather and little cousin, I don't actually remember, in really far away part of the Japan, and we live in the year 107. Why is it called 107? So 107 years earlier, for some reason, the moon exploded in an event that they call Lost Artemis, and so everything went out of whack. Most of the world was destroyed, but life goes on, and we live in a somewhat futuristic society, given that futuristic in 2007 optics seems kind of strange right now, even more because with the gift of hindsight, we know that 2007 was the same year that the iPhone came out, so kind of seems weird the way that they use flip phones and some other stuff, like they need to connect cables to phone poles to use like long distance calls and some other stuff that happens. That being said, right, it is just an optics thing, a kind of more of a setting, but it's to say that the world's kind of whack and Haruka lives in it, and the first thing that happens is that she gets let's say invited for an audition to become an idol in Tokyo. So she has to move out of her grandfather's house and go to Tokyo to live her life. in the between, she gets this weird key with a crystal, and that they say that she needs to keep on her. That is not important right now, but so on. In the train, she meets the first girl that we actually recognize, Yukiho. Little pause here. I will talk about about most of the characters in a way that I'm assuming that you at the release watched the OG Idolmaster from 2011 from A1 Pictures, or even the 2023 Million Live, to know who I'm talking about, just for reference. End of pause. Let's get back. So we meet Yukiho. Yukiho has some different quirks already. And this is a thing. Most of the girls that we will meet from the OG Idolmaster, they are at the very least different. Some of more different, some are less. But easy to say, Haruka at this point is the most familiar to the ones to we that basically I'm taking the 2011 as Mark 0, so to me it's more familiar. Let's say we meet Yukiho, and from there we meet Ritsuko and Yori, and this is a thing. Yori's design specifically, Ritsuko is a bit different, but Yori's design specifically is really out of the image that I have from the 2011 series. It is really strange. It was really strange to actually see her the first time. I was like, who? And then Ritsuko basically called her Deko-chan forehead. And then it snapped at me like, oh my god, that's Yori, what? And basically the whole thing goes through that. Haruka goes to Tokyo, gets her, let's say, kind of audition, though she doesn't actually end up becoming an idol. She becomes a master. And this is a thing that I need to cut in here and actually put some context in. The first time that I researched this anime to watch, I went into my anime list and read the synopsis for it, and I was like, is this a mecha anime? Who was either the image is wrong or the synopsis is placed in a different anime, because Idolmaster in mecha doesn't actually sound right. Who was the intern that ran out with the password? And then I was like, hold on a minute, what is this? Like, who approved this? Because as it turns out, Haruka passed the audition to become an idol, but she doesn't actually become an idol. She becomes a pilot of an idol being a mecha, and as a pilot is called a master, so basically an idol master. So they use this really weird vocabulary for the whole show for a lot of things. This is really this is the first point that turns kind of off. It feels weird when talking about it. Pass on from that, the next thing that we have is the introduction of the whole side crew and the next two girls that we see, that being Makoto and Azusa. Makoto being the more cool kind of androgynous idol, what would be the more dramatic, edgy characters, somewhat like Sasuke from Naruto in some ways, and Azusa being a more senior part of the team. At the very start, she implies that she was an idolmaster at some point, but now she became more of a manager or something, a chief, for some reason. It's not explained at first, but still. And basically the first episode kind of goes, and we see the first, let's say, interaction between Haruka and the, let's say, main mecha of the series that we will see for the most part in this anime, that being Imber. Each of them, there are only 5 mechas in the whole anime, and each of them have their own names, let's say, their own color coding too. But at this point, Imber is deactivated mecha for some reason, and we get this notion already from the start that the mechas have some kind of consciousness in them outside of the controls of a human, so they kind of have somewhat of a temper, some of somewhat of a personality. And for some reason, although Imber has been inactive for like 7-8 years, for some reason when he sees Haruka, he reactivates and protects her from an attack of an enemy mecha at that point called Nubium, that is piloted by Chihara. And from this point on, the series starts for real. So we get introduced to, let's say, our good guys. So all the girls I talked before, Makoto, Haruka, Yori, Ritsuko, and Azusa, and the director that is not the producers, the director is really different. They work for an organization called Mountain King, something like that, and their job basically is that 107 years after the moon has exploded, there is this whole 2 belts of lunar debris running around Earth, so basically orbiting around Earth, and eventually some pieces of debris fall to the atmosphere, and some of those pieces are way too big to the atmosphere to actually burn up, and so their work is to go up there, destroy the pieces of debris into smaller pieces. Somewhat of a boring job, if I may say that. I mean, it is pretty not a glamorous job if you think about it. You basically are cleaning up something. It's cleaning up, let's say, something that, if you really think about it, 170 years later, you should at the very least have found a way to clear it up all or dealt with it in a different way. And the reason why they use mechas for destroying it, because it is kind of goofy if you think about it, is and this is a real explanation that they deliver in this show, is that Japan can't have weapons of mass destruction, so the next best thing that they can use outside of missiles to destroy the debris is mechas. For some reason, that is the logic that they use. I don't question it. I just went with it. Whatever. And from this point on, the show basically runs off, and we get introduced to other people. So one of the girls that gets introduced and has a really different, let's say, role in an overall story is Yayoi. Yayoi is presented as Haruka's childhood friend, who actually prompt her to actually come to Tokyo and try her luck as an idol, because she's already a working idol, though she's kind of small, so she doesn't actually have that many fans and so on and so forth. So we, for the most part, we see Yayoi running around working in cosplay and different advertisement costumes that she needs to actually show products in. And for the most part, in the first season, more or less, the whole show kind of is pretty mundane, pretty safe, it's pretty bad, if I say so myself. I thought that the comedy, the slice of life kind of stuff they were trying to do was really dull. For the most part, the interactions are really dull. The script is not that funny. Some of the scenes kind of save themselves because the animation, the little goofy faces and silly stuff, it's kind of cute and so on and so forth. But the overall feeling that I had is that it was pretty boring. That being said, there are little squabbles between Makoto and Yori at this very start, because one of the things that happened in the first episodes, that for the most part, Chihaya appears with the Nubium to actually try to sue Imber for some reason, and when that happens and Haruka is inside Imber, but she can't actually control it because it's the first time she is actually inside of an idol, Makoto comes to try to save her, fails, because I will talk more about the fight scenes later, but she fails to actually defeat Chihara, although Chihara then retreats and so on and so forth. Makoto gets this feeling that she is weak because she couldn't one-hit Chihara for some reason, and this is a plot point that develops more towards the end of the first season. But then we get this problem that, as we already seen, Modern Kinen at this point has 2 idols. So the one that Makoto pilots at the start is called Nebula, which is the orange and yellow one, And then there is Imber, that we find out later that the only person that Imber actually responds to is Haruka and no one else. And just to cut this up, Yukihiro tries to run with Imber, although they don't try with Nebula for some reason. She fails, but to not waste her potential, they keep her as a support in the, let's say, in the command center. So she actually is the support for Haruka when Haruka actually goes out on missions and so on and so forth. That being said, there's this one problem where we have 3 pilots and 2 idols. So at this first part of the season, they decide that Makoto, being the better pilot, should be the primary pilot for Nebula, while Haruka will pilot Imber, and basically Yori is shoved more or less to the side. At this point, she becomes kind of resentful for it, but doesn't actually do much. One of the things that this actually brings up, and something that progressively turns me way off from the show in general, and really gives off some really weird vibes, is that they know for a fact that the mechas have personalities and so on and so forth, but at some point, some of the girls start to develop romantic feelings towards their own idols. So it becomes kind of weird, because how do you romance a 30-meter mecha? What? And this is a thing that will get worse towards the end of the anime, but when we get to Chihara, for example, this shit goes really wild. But easy to say, the whole thing kind of goes where it probably goes for some time. Makoto does her stuff, and is the better pilot for some time, and so on and so forth. But after some, I don't know, the 10th episode, I don't actually remember, we get then introduced to Ami. Ami is at this point, right? Ami doesn't actually have Mummy at his first encounter. We don't actually have Mummy for a long ass time, for all that matters. And for what's worth, Ami is let's say senior part of the maintenance team, the repairs team, that actually has the knowledge about a tool that they use to actually tune up the idols, called the harmonizers. So basically it measures the connection between the master and the idol, and this brings out a point that is being developed at length at this point in the anime, that Makoto is the better pilot, but not by much at this point, because she sees the idols as tools, and eventually they start to actually reject her. So it becomes kind of known from the start at this point, where Ami kind of brings up this point. We know for a fact that Makoto is going to get rejected by her mecha at this point, Nebula, and will eventually not be able to run it, not be able to pilot it. And in contrast, Yori is the one that actually believes in Nebula as a living being, somewhat. You know what, this is weird, right? We don't actually see mechas as much of living beings. I mean, I know for a fact that, for example, in Gundams, they call out the name of the mechas to bring out power and so on and so forth, but it's never really so much as this one, because this one kind of gets really into the mechas are the living beings. It kind of becomes weird. But that being said, the first season ends with Makoto actually being rejected by Nebula, not being able to run it, not being able to pilot it, and being substituted by Yori as the main pilot, and turning evil. So she basically runs from home and goes join the evil guys. From this point on, the second season really happens a lot faster, and in many ways really better, because we then actually have some conflict. So Makoto turns up to be a bad guy now. We start this whole side plot, main plot, somewhat of a... They drag this out a lot, and at some points you just want it to end, just do the thing already. That at some point there is this notion that there is a spy inside of Mondankinen working for the bad guys. I think call it Turivita, the evil organization. I don't actually remember. And not only that, but we actually get introduced also to the vice director that is, let's say, the corporate hand inside of Modern Kenan. That doesn't actually goes against our main guys, but he has his own agenda and doesn't actually help much. At some points he throws himself too much as Azusa, so much so that it kind of becomes uncomfortable even for the viewer, I guess. And for a longest time we wonder why Azusa just doesn't just break his neck, but it kind of gets explained at the end, not really, because there are some details in there. But that being said, the second season really becomes really conflict heavy. The whole thing kind of gets really weird, because at this point then we get, just to give a brief explanation, so at the start of the second season we have seen 3 idols, and now there are 5. So the 3 idols that we have are Ember, Nebula, and Nubium. And we know from the backstory of Ami that there is a 4th one called Tempestas, and a 5th one which at that point in the start of the season we have not yet discovered. That being said, get the activation of the last core, the last idol heart, let's say, that is not yet in a body but can be introduced in a body, and so on and so forth. And then there is this whole fight between Turivita and Modern Kenan, and a whole lot of stuff happens. Haruka gets formally introduced to Chihaya. Chihaya actually shows that she wants Ember for a personal reason, because there's this whole backstory where Chihara was the first master of Ember, but Ember kind of rejects her at some point, and the whole thing kind of goes on from there. At this point too, the one girl that accompanies Chihaya as her, I don't actually know I don't know, evil lolly, whatever, called Rifa, gets a man-made idol called Epitemus, I think that is the name, and basically wrecks Yori's shit for real. It's the fight at this point, the good guys really lose it, for lack of a better word, and so they lose the 5th core called Heims, and then the evil guys have Heims and Nubium, and now the good guys have Nebula and Ember, but then we have different stuff. From this point on, the show goes on. There is the side plot about the spy. Ends up being that actually Yukihiro had, let's say, a lifelong debt with Chihaya, and for her love and depth and gratefulness for Chihaya to be the one that basically rescued her and gave her, let's say, purpose in life, she betrays Modern Kenan and basically leaks all the information to Turivita so Turivita can attack it. There is this whole they wanted to be gruesome scene where a lot of the maintenance crew gets slaughtered in how do I say that, at a firing squad. It's a firing squad. It's pretty, oh boy. The idea, at the very least, the scene itself is played out way too safe for my tastes, and considering that at the end they actually do blood and the whole thing, I really have to wonder if at the end they just gave it up, like fuck it, or if there was a different reason for holding back at that point. I don't know. The whole thing happens, and after they attack one of the bases, Ami is in danger, but at this point, for some miracle, Tempestas, that was at that point lost in, deep space, reappears, drops Mummy in the ground near Ami, and saves everyone, even though he gives up his own body, but the core is intact, so it doesn't actually change anything really. It basically just saved the girls. It's kind of cute, I don't know. And now the good guys have 3 cores, the bad guys have 2 cores, and the whole thing kind of comes to a head at some point where when Makoto actually gets Heims to become functional, there's this whole altercation between them where Chihara gets Ember back, Haruka basically goes through her second act low point, so it's pretty down the dumps, really sad times, and so Yori becomes kind of angry at her because she's so selfish and whatever, and the whole thing kind of plays out as you would think that it would be on a normal shonen show, and whole thing kind of goes through its paces until some point that Haruka regains her spark, tells Yori like, yeah, I'm going to fight, gets in there, talks to him, but when he actually, let's say, air quotes here, regains his senses, he sees Haruka for real, he ejects Chihaya. Chihaya has that perplexed face on her. Somewhat good scene, I don't know. And from this point on, they basically cement this idea of Haruka actually liking Ember, although I will talk more about this later. The whole thing kind of goes through its paces until Chihara actually loses all her shit, so she goes mad with her obsession with Ember and gives up her body, gets fused with a mechanical island to fly up and basically destroy everything. Then from this point on, the girls kind of, after Chihaya gives up her body, the girls kind of make up more or less, nearly get killed by a, how do I say that, orbital laser that was commanded by the vice director, because he is the corporate, called by corporate, but the face of the guy that actually sends it is the vice director. And Nubium, in act of defiance, defends both Yukihiro and Haruka. At this point, with Chihaya dead, Azusa also dies due to bullet wounds and whatever. There's this whole backstory about Azusa and Chihaya being adopted daughters of the guys who invented the idols and so on and so forth, and the whole thing where they are augmented humans to actually pilot better, and the whole thing kind of gets way out of hand for some reason, and ends up that they need to save the world by sacrificing the idols, and then the idols all their own way eject the girls out at the last second, saving all the girls. At this point, right, all the girls that are still here, so Chihaya and Azusa basically dead at this point, and they save the girls, everyone lived happily ever after, and that's the end of it. I glossed over so many details and so many things that I kind of wanted to say, but really doesn't actually add anything to the review, really. So let's get to my opinion, and then I can explain more. So the first thing that put me off is that I can't take this anime seriously. The first thing is, as I already said, the 1 Mark 0, the one thing that I think when talking about Idol Master, the original Idol Master, is the 2011 entry. That being said, there are so many things that this anime does, let's say, wrong, in my opinion, that just, oh my god, I can't. Let me preface this like this. I did not look up if the voice actors are the same for all the girls, and for some instances it doesn't really matter, because just the acting alone is enough to put me off. So for instance, Haruka for the most part is the same, which is okay. I don't care, that's the same. Ritsuko maybe more jovial, more teensy, let's say, more teenager-like than her counterpart in the 2011 entry, but that's okay, because at that point she was older than the girls, and you would expect some kind of difference, but that's not really that important. Then we start with the problems, right? So Yukihiro at the start is pretty okay. It's pretty Yukihiro at the start, where when she doesn't actually have that much self-confidence and doesn't actually have that fortitude that she has after her episode in the original Idolmaster. But when the spy arc comes, oh my god, what the fuck was that? It was just, I can't, and I mean it, I can't see Yukihiro with a frown, with a bad face, you know, angry at someone. And when they show that, it's not even that I want to laugh, but it was just, that's not Yukihiro, you know? That's not the one girl that I know. And that goes for a lot of things. So, for instance, right, Yuri, for example, outside from the fact that her design is really different from the one that we got in the 2011. Yuri in 2011, she is, let's say, you know that she's a tsundere, but she has the Ojo-sama trait on her, and those two together end up with a tsundere that is more reserved, so she doesn't lose her decorum in between her being a tsundere and doing tsundere stuff. But in this one, she doesn't actually have the Ojo-sama trait on her, and so it becomes more, she becomes way more confrontive, more aggressive as a tsundere, more than when we were talking about the 2011 entry, which felt kind of weird. It is still in character and overall doesn't actually affect much of her as a character, but it is noticeable, and really the lack of, let's say, the lack of the plushie is one of the things that, yeah, this is kind of Yuri older and with less money, I guess. It's not the same, you know, it's, there's something off here. Makoto is, oh my god, I can't really see it. Makoto is basically an edgy character of a shonen anime. Like, oh my god, who wrote her like this? Like, at the start, oh my god, it's terrible, because she gives such unnecessary mean answers to anyone, and she has such a bad attitude. You can't really root for her at the start. It's terrible. And the only part where she becomes kind of redeemable is at the end, when everything's going to shit. Oh my god, I can't see Makoto as that, you know. I can't see Makoto as an edgy andro girl, a tomboy, I don't know, at this point, because that's not her. Makoto had the whole complex about being raised as a boy and having that notion that she's a girl and that she's a boy and that she can be cute and can be a tomboy at the same time and can do her own stuff and be her own self with her own style. And now she's just an edgy character of a shonen. It is not natural. Oh my god. And then there's the one that hits really off. It's just another character altogether. That is Yayoi. I mean, Yayoi is such a sweet girl in the 2011 entry. She's just so cute. And when you look at her here, it's not that she's not cute, but I don't see her as that mature, you know? That mature, level-headed. At some point, she's level-headed in the original, but not that kind of level-headed. It's kind of off. Then there's Asusa. Asusa is basically underdeveloped, I would say. She does not help whatsoever, for the most part. She helps at the end, but it is just for dramatic effect, because when she dies, Makoto kind of goes and does a whole lot of character development off screen, but it doesn't actually help. I mean, this doesn't actually add anything, and she doesn't actually have the quips that she had in the 2011 entry that helped a lot with her character development and to show her personality. And here she's really just a side character, really bad explored. And then we have the one that, oh my god, I can't say it. Chihara as the bad character, oh my god. As the villain, I just couldn't. When I saw that, I was like, oh my god, this is gonna be bad. Because, for one, as I already said in my Million Live review, Chihara's struggle, I mean, at that point, 2007, 2011 wasn't even in the horizon, the whole thing kind of, you know, I can see that what I'm saying is unreasonable, given the basis of the argument. What I'm saying is unreasonable, but I can't see it. I just can't. I can't see Chihara as the villain whatsoever. I really can't. And this is a thing that I hope they don't do it, okay? When I say this, I hope they don't do it. If they ever had the audacity to actually redo this mess, the first thing that I would do is to add the 3 girls that are missing from the 2011 entry. So we don't have Hibiki, we don't have Miki, and we don't have Takane, which is outright sacrilegious because Takane is the best girl. But outside from that, if anyone was to be the villain, it would be probably either Miki or Takane, I don't know. Chihara, I just can't. I can't. The notion that I have a Oitori downloaded as a flag and I listen to it on a semi-regular basis, I can't see her as a bad person. You know, the feels, man, the feels, the whole thing, I can't. She's too good to do that, you know? Now, then we get to the anime overall. So, the anime starts with this whole pretense of using this terminology of idols and backstage, upstage, act on, and so on and so forth. First off, the main job that they have destroying meteorites, pretty boring. The squabbles that they have in between, pretty boring. The first season was really bad. I nearly dropped this multiple times. The whole thing just felt such a slog to watch through because, oh my god, it is terrible in this sense. The story doesn't go anywhere, the characters don't go anywhere, there's no action whatsoever, so you would think that the mecha anime would have action, doesn't actually have it. The animation's pretty terrible for the most part. They cut a lot of in-between shots to, I don't know, save money, save time, because some of the episodes feel kind of rushed. The girls don't actually have any development whatsoever. They try to make space for a whole lot of stuff at the same time. It feels just off overall. The writing, the whole scene composition whatsoever. Talking about the story overall, it has a really off feel, and this is the recurring theme here. It's all off. The one thing that I can actually relate it to, it's similar to, do you remember when, like in the early 2000s here in the West, I think they kind of did this on Japan too, but I remember this in the West, that they did, so let's say boy-focused toy companies would do girls specific lines of products just to try to cash in on an untapped market. For instance, do you remember when Nerf did Nerf Rebel? That was the kind of girls collection, and it flopped hard into the pavement because there was no market there and executives didn't actually buy into it too much. It feels kind of like that. It feels like they just grabbed Idolmaster Girl. They basically grabbed Gundam, toned it way down so there's no blood, no child killing, no violence whatsoever. Toned it way down, put up an Idolmaster skin on it, and just send it. This is what I feel it is like. Another thing, this anime doesn't actually have almost, if at all, music of the Idolmaster franchise. The few songs that there are, they don't actually present the names, which also just goes against what I'm trying to do here. And overall, I think it would add something to the anime, if nothing else. The whole thing feels kind of dumb overall. The action scenes are really terribly framed. Not framed, but the action scenes are bad. Most of the fights end up with 2 punches and exposition and retreat. That's the basic action scene here. All the, let's say, somewhat intricate fighting is basically done on a really early 2000s 3D style, or really staggered animation, let's say, really slow animation, which adds to the fact that this is not well animated whatsoever. And talking in tandem with the animation, the art style doesn't actually help a lot either. I didn't actually mention this when I talked about Iron Blood Orphans and Witch from Mercury, because it didn't actually feel necessary at that point, because they each had their own style, but there's a difference there. Witch from Mercury goes towards the more modern, thinner lines for art style and more fluid animation, where Iron Blood Orphans uses thicker lines and more cartoony, stylized art style. This one goes, and this is a thing that kind of shocked me when I first started watching it. The art style really seems older than 2007 for some reason. Mind you, 2007 was the same year of Gurren Lagann and if I'm not mistaken, Death Note, and even if I'm not mistaken too, the original Fullmetal Alchemist, coming off the heels of Blood Plus and some other stuff that came out in that same time period. It feels really off to the overall scene at the time that this art style was used. Feels way older than it actually is, and I don't know, feels off. The whole thing feels off. The art style just helps to aggravate it. With that being said, the only thing that I actually have still to comment is that they start with the whole pretense of using the terminology and so on and so forth. The best parts of this whole thing is when they stop doing it at the end of the first season, and I think the start of the second, they actually stop using the weird vocabulary to actually do stuff. So they act on backstage, the idols and so on and so forth. They kind of tone it down a bit and comes up with more action-packed episodes, which helps. And I felt just like, well, you could just do it from the start, but I guess. And not only that, but then we have to talk about the relationship with the mechas. I can't really explain this feeling, but it just feels weird because and they say this at the end, but at the very start it kind of becomes kind of obvious that each of the girls refer to their own mecha as their boyfriend, more or less, and it kind of plays out like that, but the mechas don't actually speak. They don't actually show an emotion. It becomes really weird. So how are you like getting all this innate information about emotions and so on? So this doesn't make sense. What the hell? And it feels weird. At the end of the show, Haruka gives a kiss to Imber, and the whole thing kind of feels weird. It feels really weird. And with that, really, let's call it quits here. So let's wrap up. So if you like my rants, if you like the show, if you like what I do, thank you for listening. Please like, please follow, please share, depending on the platform you're in. And I hope you stick around for next time. Bye.